All right, let's grab our gear and dive deep. We're looking at this source you shared, the book about Netflix culture.
Yeah, the one by Reed Hastings and Erin Meyer. Fascinating stuff.
Totally. So we're going to pull back the curtain on this whole no rules idea, try and figure out, what makes it actually tick.
Exactly. Our mission here is really to get into the core principles behind Netflix's success. Not just the shiny surface, but how this kind of counterintuitive approach actually works on the ground.
And like right from the get-go, the book hits you with this almost legendary story. You got to picture this.
Yeah.
It's the early 2000s, Netflix. Tiny startup, 2 years old, and frankly, bleeding cash, like losing $57 million a year.
Yeah, hemorrhaging money.
And they walk into Blockbuster HQ.
Yeah.
Blockbuster, the absolute heavyweight champ back then, doing what, $6 billion in business?
Thousands of stores, yeah. The giant, and Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph are there pitching Blockbuster to buy them.
And the price tag.
A cool $50 million. Can you even imagine being Reed Hastings? Hearing Blockbuster's CEO, John Antioco, just flatly turn them down.
Wow.
Reed apparently felt totally deflated. He described imagining, like, all 60,000 Blockbuster employees just laughing at them.
It's $50 million. That's unbelievable now. Blockbuster passing on that.
Crazy, right? But here's the kicker. Fast forward just 10 years.
Yeah.
By 2010, Blockbuster, bankrupt.
Gone.
By 2019, just one store left. And Netflix, they've pivoted from DVDs to streaming. They're global, winning Oscars, making hit shows.
167 million subscribers by then. It's just wild.
So the central question Hastings and Meyer tackle is exactly that. How did Netflix keep adapting, keep reinventing itself when these huge companies, Blockbuster, Kodak, Nokia, AOL...
Even Reed's own first company, Pure Software.
Right. How did Netflix succeed where they failed?
And the book argues pretty strongly it wasn't just market power or, tons of cash.
Nope. It was the culture.
A culture built on, putting truly stunning people first. Valuing innovation over efficiency, over rigid process. And deliberately getting rid of control.
It really boils down to two main pillars. Achieving super high talent density and mastering this idea of leading with context, not control.
They call it the Freedom and Responsibility Framework, F&R.
Yeah, F&R. And you got to think of it like a cycle, a virtuous cycle. You remove controls. That creates freedom, which demands responsibility.
Okay.
That responsibility then attracts even more top talent, which then means you can handle even fewer controls.
Which leads to more speed, more innovation.
Exactly. But they're really clear this isn't a switch you just flip. It's a process. You build it carefully, layer by layer.
And it's so valuable having Erin Meyer's voice in there, too. Because she admits she was, super skeptical at first.
Totally. She saw the famous Netflix culture deck, adequate performance gets generous severance, no vacation policy, honesty always.
Yeah, it sounds intense.
She thought it sounded kind of hyper-masculine, maybe confrontational, potentially unsafe, even like a sweatshop recipe.
Right, like it could just crush people.
Exactly. On paper, it could sound brutal. But then she saw Netflix's actual success. And crucially, she did hundreds of interviews with employees for the book all over the world.
And that changed her view.
It helped her understand how, in practice, when these things are done right, they actually foster growth. That skeptical lens is so important, it keeps it grounded.
Absolutely. It's not painted as some perfect utopia. The book shows how they built this culture brick by brick, often out of sheer necessity. So that's how we'll approach it. Follow their steps.
Right. And step one, the absolute foundation, talent density.
Okay, so the first brick, talent density, non-negotiable according to the book. Reed's experience at his first company, Pure Software, really hammered this home for him.
Yeah, he talks about how Pure grew, and every time someone messed up, like a salesperson ran up a huge hotel bill or someone's dog ate a document.
Seriously.
Apparently, he'd instinctively just add another rule, another process, to prevent that specific mistake from happening again.
Makes sense on the surface.
But what he saw was that this pileup of rules, designed to stop errors, actually choked creativity. It made the company slow, inflexible. So when the market shifted from C++ to Java, Pure Software just couldn't pivot fast enough. They ended up having to sell the company.
So the lesson was, too many rules kill innovation.
Exactly. Processes designed for the lowest common denominator hold everyone back.
Then came that huge crisis at Netflix in 2001. The dot-com bubble burst.
Yep. VC money just vanished. Netflix was still losing a lot of money. They had 120 employees.
And they had to cut back hard.
Agonizingly hard. They had to lay off a third of the company, down to just 80 people.
Wow. How do we even decide who stays?
Reed, Mark Randolph, and Patty McCord, their HR head, who was key in shaping this culture, They had to figure out who are the essential 80 keepers.
We keep her.
And they realized they couldn't just keep the good people. They had to keep only the truly stunning ones. Exceptionally creative, super productive, great collaborators
So even good people, nice people.
had to go. Even some gifted people who were maybe difficult to work with, it was purely about performance and collaboration impact.
Brutal.
Yeah.
But what happened next was the shocker, right?
Totally counterintuitive. They cut costs, fewer people, but the atmosphere in the office didn't just survive, it actually improved dramatically.
Improved.
The remaining 80 people weren't just doing the work, they were doing more work, and with way more passion, more energy. Patty McCord said it felt like everyone was in love with their work again.
So that's where talent density clicked.
Exactly. It wasn't just about having some talented people. It was about radically increasing the proportion of talent per employee, the density.
By getting rid of the merely adequate, the average talent level just shot up.
Skyrocketed. In every meeting, on every project.
And why is that so powerful? What does that high density do?
Well, the book argues that high performers thrive when they're surrounded by other high performers. It's infectious.
They push each other.
Yeah, they challenge each other, they learn faster from each other, they motivate each other. It creates this performance spiral upward.
Makes sense. And the flip side, what about having just okay performers around?
The book is pretty blunt about that. Even one or two merely adequate performers can really drag things down.
How so?
They sap energy, lower the quality of discussions. People have to create workarounds for them. Top performers get frustrated and might leave.
And it sends a message, right, that mediocrity is acceptable.
Precisely. Which is toxic. It signals that the standard isn't actually that high.
They mentioned that study, didn't they? Professor Will Phelps.
Yeah, the one with the actors playing roles in student teams. The slacker, the jerk, the depressive pessimist.
Right. What happened there?
Just one of those underperformers, even in a short exercise, tanked the whole team's effectiveness by like 30 or 40%.
Wow. That much.
Yeah. And the negativity spread fast. The slacker made others slack off. The jerk made others more abrasive. The pessimist just brought everyone down. Performance is contagious, good and bad.
Reed even connects it back to being a kid. Seeing one troublemaker on the playground changed the whole group dynamic.
Yeah, the Calvin fistfight story, how one person's behavior just ripples out. It's a fundamental group dynamic thing.
So after that 2001 experience, the commitment was clear.
Absolutely non-negotiable. Maintain high talent density. Period.
Which means what in practice?
Being relentless about hiring only the best, paying them top of their personal market value. And this is the hard part, having the courage to let people go.
Even nice people.
Even nice, adequate people.
Yeah.
If they weren't consistently performing at an exceptional level, or if their behavior wasn't collaborative, they had to go. They needed stunning colleagues.
And to find stunning colleagues again.
Highly talented, diverse backgrounds, exceptionally creative, accomplish a significant amount of important work, and crucially, collaborate really effectively. It's the whole package. Talent, impact, and teamwork.
So this is it. The first dot. The absolute foundation.
That's what Hastings and Meyer stress. Without this bedrock of talent density, none of the other stuff, the candor, the freedom, none of it works. It falls apart.
Okay, so foundation laid. You've got this room full of stunning colleagues. What's next?
Then and only then can you safely introduce the next critical element, widespread candor.
Right. With the talent foundation solid, step 2 is ramping up candor. The idea being, say what you really think. With positive intent.
Exactly. It's about getting feedback, opinions, even difficult feelings out in the open. But crucially, the intent has to be genuinely helpful to the person or to the company, not just to, vent or attack.
Reed's pretty open about his own struggles with this, right? Being conflict avoidant.
Yeah, he talks about how he grew up avoiding conflict and how at Pure Software, he failed to give direct feedback to someone, went around their back instead.
And it blew up.
Predictably. He actually credits marriage counseling with teaching him how powerful, direct, honest communication could be, and he wanted to bring that into Netlflix.
So they started actively encouraging people to speak up.
With positive intent, yes. And what they noticed was the more candid people were, the faster performance improved. It was like another lever for getting better.
That story about Barry McCarthy, the CFO, is a great example.
Yeah, Leslie Kilgore, the CMO, noticed Barry could be moody, and it affected people. She mentioned it to Reed.
And Reed didn't step in.
Nope. He told Leslie, you should tell Barry directly.
Wow. Takes guts.
She did it.
Yeah.
Apparently used data, even some humor, spoke his financial language, and Barry, he took it incredibly well.
He didn't get defensive.
Not at all. He actually thanked her, took it to his own team, and asked them to call him out if they saw it.
Whoa. Now that's modeling behavior.
Exactly. It wasn't just about Barry getting feedback. It showed his whole team it was okay, even encouraged. And the book says that day by day, candor spread. It was actually increasing talent density because people were improving faster through feedback.
Which led to that rule. Only say about someone what you will say to their face.
A cornerstone. Reed apparently enforced this constantly. If people complained about colleagues, he'd stop them and say, "Have you told them that directly?"
Cuts out the backstabbing, the politics.
Massively. And it speeds things up because issues get surfaced and dealt with, not whispered about.
What about that Doug and Jordan story? The India trip.
Right. Doug's relatively new. He's in India with Jordan, a senior guy. Doug sees Jordan's impatience is actually damaging the relationships they're there to build.
And Doug felt that awkwardness, right? Like, do I say something? He's senior.
Exactly. That pull of niceness, protocol, hierarchy. But he decided to be Netflix about it.
Hitting.
Instead of letting it slide, he put feedback from India trip on their meeting agenda for the next week, gave the feedback directly.
And Jordan's reaction.
Initially surprised, maybe a little taken aback, but then he processed it, realized Doug was right, and actually changed his behavior. Started telling people on future trips, "Hey, I can be impatient, call me out."
That's pretty amazing. Although the book points out he could have given the feedback sooner.
Okay. Yeah, the missed opportunity was not finding a way to give it during the dinner, potentially salvaging that specific interaction. But still, the direct feedback later had a big impact.
It really highlights why this is so hard for us, though. Giving criticism feels risky.
Totally. Our brains freak out a bit, fight or flight, fear of rejection, especially publicly.
But weirdly, people actually want feedback.
Paradoxically, yes. The studies cited show most people prefer corrective feedback. They feel it helps them improve. We kind of intuitively get that feedback loops are good for learning.
I like that speed sign example they used, the one in Garden Grove.
Yeah, just simple, real-time data. Your speed made people slow down by 14%. No cops, no tickets. Just information.
So applying that idea to people helps them learn faster, adapt quicker, reduces the need for rules.
Exactly. Less need for top-down control when people are constantly getting feedback from peers and their managers.
Okay, so how do you actually build this culture of candor? Where do you start?
The book says start with the toughest part. Get employees comfortable giving candid feedback upwards, to the boss.
The whole emperor has no clothes thing.
Right. Leaders naturally get less honest feedback as they rise, which is dangerous, so managers have to actively ask for it. Put it on the agenda for 1.1s. Regularly solicit criticism.
And crucially, how they receive it matters, right?
Absolutely critical. They need to show it's safe, using those belonging cues Daniel Coyle talks about.
Like what?
Genuine appreciation, calm tone, leaning in, thanking people publicly for their courage. These signals answer the subconscious question, am I safe if I speak truth to power here?
The Ted Saranda story really drives this home. The chief content officer.
Yeah, amazing story. No college background, started in video stores. Brian writes first day at Netflix, he's in a meeting, and some relatively junior person openly challenges Ted on something.
Brian must have been horrified.
Totally. He thought, this person just committed career suicide, political death.
That's Ted.
After the meeting, Ted walks over, puts a hand on the person's shoulder, that physical belonging cue, and says, "Great meeting. Thanks for your input." Simple, powerful.
And then he explained it to Brian later.
Yeah, pulled him aside in the washroom and said something like, "The day you sit on your feedback because you're worried about being popular is the day you need to leave Netflix. We hire you for your opinions."
Wow. Crystal clear expectation setting.
Right. Belonging cue plus explicit cultural rule.
Yeah.
That's how you build it.
And Reed models this himself. Gets a ton of feedback.
Constantly. The book says he gets the most feedback in their public 360s. He asks for it and religiously responds with those belonging cues. Even shares tough feedback publicly, like that memo about him rushing through topics in meetings.
And that Rochelle King example. A director 3 levels down, emailing Reed directly.
Incredible, isn't it? She saw him dismiss Patty McCord in a meeting, felt his tone was damaging, and sent him a direct email explaining the impact.
And his response?
Immediate appreciation. He wrote back saying he recalled feeling shitty afterwards and told her, "Please continue to call me out." Think about how that would go down in most companies.
Yeah, not well. But okay, candor isn't just Being blunt,
Yeah.
right? There's a risk of misuse.
Huge risk. The book is very clear. Candor done badly is toxic. It's not a license to be cruel. They use that "A Star is Born" example. Jackson Maine's feedback wasn't helpful. It was just mean.
So they actually teach people how to do it right.
Yes, they invest time in it. Which brings us to the 4A feedback guidelines. Really important.
Okay, what are the 4A's?
For giving feedback, first, aim to assist. Your intent must be positive, to help the person or the company, not just to make yourself feel better, like the food in your teeth example. Don't just point it out. Frame it as wanting to help their presentation.
Got it. Assist. What's second?
Actionable. The feedback has to be about something the person can actually do differently. Saying, your presentation was bad isn't helpful. Saying, the way you solicited input wasn't working is better, even better. Try calling on specific nationalities first. Concrete suggestions.
Okay, aim to assist. Actionable. What about receiving feedback?
Third, appreciate. Fight that knee-jerk defensiveness. Listen carefully. Stay open-minded. Receive it calmly. No anger, no excuses in the moment.
Easier said than done sometimes.
For sure. That's why the 4th A is key. Accept or discard. You must listen and consider it. But you are not required to agree or follow the advice. The decision is yours. Just say thank you sincerely and reflect on it later.
So listen, consider, but ultimately you decide.
Exactly. Let's look at Doug and Jordan again. Doug's feedback aimed to assist. It was actionable. Jordan showed appreciation, and he chose to accept it and change. That's the 4A's in action.
And they encourage giving feedback whenever, wherever.
Feedback? Anywhere, anytime. The idea is to give it when and where it's most useful. Maybe privately, maybe in a small group, maybe even publicly if the situation calls for it and the culture supports it.
Which brings us to that crazy Rose and Bianca story.
Oh yeah, that one's intense. Rose is presenting a risky marketing plan for 13 Reasons Why Season 2. Big meeting, 40 global colleagues.
It's not going well.
She's getting pushback, starts getting defensive, talking too fast, losing the room. You can picture it.
Then Bianca just shouts from the back.
Yep. Rose, this isn't working. You are losing the room. You sound defensive. You're talking too fast. Take a deep breath. You need the room.
Oh my God, in front of 40 people.
In most places, unthinkable. Career ending, maybe? But at Netflix, with this candor culture built,
How did Rose react?
she received it as a gift, showed appreciation. Recognized Bianca was right. She was defensive, talking too fast. She took actionable steps, took a breath, said, okay, I'm here to listen. Let's go back. And she saved the presentation. Bianca's feedback aimed to assist Rose and the project, and it was immediately actionable. Rose appreciated it and acted on it. Public candor as a gift.
Wild. But it only works because of the underlying trust and the 4A framework being understood. Now, what about people who are just jerks? Talented, but jerks.
The brilliant jerk. Critical distinction. The book says you absolutely cannot tolerate them if you want candor and high performance.
Why not?
Brilliant jerks poison the well. They misuse candor. It becomes stabbing in the front. They demoralize people, break teams apart. Netflix explicitly preaches no brilliant jokes.
That Paula example illustrates it, right? Super creative, but difficult.
Exactly. Pounding tables, talking over people, working on her laptop during meetings she disagreed with, interrupting. She thought she was being candid, but she just came across as abrasive and disrespectful.
And despite her talent.
She's no longer at Netflix. Real candor, the helpful kind, requires thoughtfulness, the 4A's, self-awareness. It's not just blurting things out.
And they coach people on this, like the Justin Becker story.
Yeah, the engineering manager who gave really blunt feedback to a junior person. His intent was partly good, but partly just frustration.
And his manager stepped in.
Didn't call him a jerk. Instead, asked questions like, did you intend to hurt the company? Are you able to communicate decently? That prompted self-reflection for Justin. It's about coaching the how.
Okay, so build the talent density, dot one.
Right.
Then build the pervasive 4A guided candor, dot two. This feedback loop increases speed and effectiveness.
Right. And with those two powerful elements firmly in place, now you're finally ready, according to the book, to start removing controls.
Okay, section 3, removing controls. The logic being, if you have super talented people who get constant candid feedback,
then you don't need as many traditional rules and approval processes, right? Because those are often designed for the lowest common denominator, the people who might be sloppy or irresponsible. High density plus high candor, less need for external controls.
the philosophy shifts. It's less about tracking hours, more about impact.
Yeah, Reed talks about his frustration seeing people just working like crazy instead of focusing on making a huge impact. Value isn't time spent, it's achievement.
Which leads us to Maybe the most famous control they removed, the vacation policy.
The infamous no vacation policy. It actually started with an employee pointing out the logic gap.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they said something like, look, we don't track hours worked, and that varies hugely. Why do we track vacation days, which vary way less?
Good point.
Patty McCord's radical suggestion is tell people, take some.
Reed had nightmares about this, didn't he?
Yeah, he worried about two things. One, the office being totally empty because everyone's on vacation.
The party scenario.
But his bigger fear was the opposite. A zombie office. Nobody takes vacation. Everyone burns out. Creativity dies.
Because vacation is actually important for innovation, like that Neil Hunt example.
Exactly. Their tech leader, whose extreme outdoor trips often sparked business ideas, like the DVD recommendation algorithm. Time away gives you perspective, mental space.
So they just scrapped the policy for salaried folks.
Completely. No set number of days, no asking the boss beforehand, no tracking. Employees just decide for themselves when and how long based on their judgment.
What are the upsides they saw?
Big ones. Attracting and retaining talent, especially younger generations who value that autonomy, cutting bureaucracy, and maybe most importantly, it sends a massive signal of trust.
And trust fosters responsibility.
That's the theory. But the book is also clear. This can fail spectacularly if leaders don't walk the talk.
Meaning?
If the boss takes only 2 weeks off, nobody else feels comfortable taking more, no matter what the policy says. They tell that story of another CEO who tried it, failed, and went back to a fixed policy because the modeling wasn't there.
The soft limits come from what people see leaders doing.
Totally. Which is why Reed makes such a point of taking like 6+ weeks a year and talking about it. Patty McCord apparently told him he had to. Erin Meyer even noticed how often he was away.
But it doesn't always trickle down perfectly. They mention counterexamples.
Yeah, Kyle, the exec who works like a journalist on deadline, his whole department felt pressure not to take time off. And Donna, the marketing manager who burned out because she felt she couldn't take a real break, modeling has to be consistent.
But when it works, like with Greg Peters, the chief product officer.
It really works. He leaves by 6, takes big trips, tells his staff his actions speak louder than words.
And his team follows suit. John, the engineer, taking 7 weeks. Sarah taking 10 weeks, but working intense hours otherwise.
Exactly. They figure out how to make it work for them, organizing their lives in that crazy way. As long as the work gets done at a high level, it's about flexibility and results.
And this can even override national culture, like Greg in Japan.
Yeah, that's a powerful example. Japan has strong norms about long hours, low vacation, karoshi. But Greg modeled leaving early, taking big breaks. And his manager, Haruka, describes the transformation from her old Japanese company culture to working for him. Leadership behavior can shift norms.
Okay, but just removing the policy isn't enough. You need context.
Absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Otherwise, chaos. They describe early problems. The accounting director freaking out about someone taking January off, the manager with a swamped team, and people taking long trips.
Because nobody set expectations.
Right. Without policies, managers must provide context. The accounting director needs to say, January is off limits. The swamped manager needs to say, okay, maybe only one person out at a time, or we need 3 months notice for a month off. Clear communication replaces the rulebook.
And Reed reinforces this at scale in those QBR meetings.
Yeah, uses those meetings with top leaders to discuss vacation norms, address issues, share best practices for balance, constantly reinforcing the context.
And the key takeaway isn't necessarily that people take tons more vacation.
Not always. That mammoth study found usage was similar, but the freedom itself was hugely valued. The journalist Ryan Blitzstein couldn't find rampant abuse. It's the trust signal.
Which led to that phrase, give freedom to get responsibility.
Exactly. Reed noticed after removing vacation tracking, people started taking ownership of small things, like cleaning the office fridge. Removing the external control somehow sparked internal responsibility. Freedom and responsibility are linked.
Okay, so they applied this same thinking to travel and expenses.
Yep. Thinking back to that pure software problem, the guy denied a taxi reimbursement because of a rigid rule. Wasted time, killed common sense.
Early Netflix didn't have rules, being a startup. But then they went public.
Right, 2004, CFO Barry McCarthy proposed a standard corporate T&E policy, limits, approvals, the works.
But Reed pushed back because of the vacation policy success.
Yeah, he was resistant to adding controls. Barry agreed, but stressed, okay, if no rules, we need crystal clear context.
So they tried to define guidelines and found it hard.
Really hard. That meeting discussing edge cases, chocolates for a host, printer paper, you can't write a policy for everything. Nuance matters.
Their first guideline attempt was Spend company money as if it were your own.
Yeah, Reed thought that'd make everyone frugal like him.
But it didn't work.
Failed pretty fast. People spend their own money very differently. David Wells, the frugal farm kid flying economy while the content team flew first class on a short hop. Lars, the high earner living paycheck to paycheck, it wasn't a useful guide.
So what's the guideline now?
Much simpler, much better. Act in Netflix's best interest.
Ah, that connects it to the company goal.
Exactly. Is flying business on a red eye before a big pitch in Netflix's best interest? Maybe. Is the whole team flying business to Mexico in Netflix's best interest? Probably not. It forces judgment aligned with the company.
But what about the fear? People just going wild with the company card. That study about cheating the newspaper box.
They acknowledge that fear and the data that people can abuse trust. But they argue it works at Netflix because it's not a free-for-all. There's strong context up front and checks out back.
Context up front being.
That guidance David Wells gave new hires. Imagine explaining this purchase to your boss and me, the CFO. Can you comfortably say it's in Netflix's best interest, making them run that mental check?
And it checks out back.
No pre-approvals needed, just submit receipts. But finance sends managers monthly reports showing every single expense for each employee on their team.
So managers can see everything.
Yep, and they're expected to review it. Patty McCord apparently reviewed HRs meticulously. Managers can decide how deep to dive based on trust and observation. Accountability isn't gone, it's just shifted.
And these are just the first steps in removing controls, the book says. More comes later. Decision-making, approvals, etc.
Right, leading fully with context, not control. That's the ultimate goal.
Okay, let's pull back then. We've covered this initial journey from the book, starting with that absolute bedrock.
Talent density. Non-negotiable first step. Get stunning colleagues.
Then build on that with pervasive, candid feedback, using the 4 A's, getting leaders to model it, creating psychological safety.
Dot 2. Crucial for learning and speed.
And then, with those in place, you can start carefully removing traditional controls, vacation, expenses, but only with intense focus on setting context and leadership modeling.
That's the sequence. Talent, candor, controls removed. That's the engine of no rules rules.
And that's what gave them the trust, the speed, the innovation to keep adapting, unlike Blockbuster and the others.
Fostering an environment where talented people have the freedom and responsibility to make great decisions.
And remember, this deep dive came directly from that source material you sent us.
We tailored it right from the book's framework.
So, the book ends suggesting you could try applying some of this F&R stuff in your own world. Thinking about that critical sequence, talent, candor, controls, here's something to chew on. What's maybe the riskiest shortcut you might be tempted to take if you tried this? And which of those 3 pillars, talent, density, candor, or removing controls, do you think is actually the hardest one to get right in the real world? Something to mull over.
Thanks for listening. Visit our library and subscribe below for more book summaries. This has been a Sprint Reads production.